Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel, and look at the size of the beast on the bench today. This is the new ARRMA Mojave. It is a 7-scale 6S brushless powered 4-wheel drive desert truck, and it looks like an absolute animal. I think ARRMA is just really going to town, creating some wild stuff for us to drive, and I can't wait to get behind the wheel of this particular truck. There is actually a lot of new parts on this. You know, you see a lot of ARRMA vehicles. They're kind of, variations of other platforms that they have. And this does share a lot of parts with like the Notorious, the Outcast, the Creighton. However, there is a lot of new stuff on here and stuff that I really like and stuff that looks like really worthwhile changes to me. So why don't we get started in going over all the details and features of the truck. And of course, we'll start on the outside with the body. And this is, obviously a brand new body for them, since this is a 7-scale machine. And it's got a very cool paint job on there. I've been just, super ecstatic with the way ARRMA has been detailing their trucks lately. It just looks exciting before you even drive it. And obviously, we've got the green paint scheme. I think it's more of a yellow. Let me know what you think. Do I need glasses? It looks more yellow to me. But anyway, they say it's green on the box, and it's got these stars and jagged stripes and stuff like that. Just looks so cool. It's actually like a two-tone finish, as far as it's a matte finish over here in the darker part, and then the green stripes on here are a gloss. So it's really cool the way they went and just detailed it. I mean, just looks incredible, I think. We've got lots of decals on here, obviously, D-Boots tires, ARRMA, 6S power. It's just, you pull out of the box and you're ready to go, basically. No more detailing. But up top here, this is a pretty neat feature. We've seen it on some of the other ARRMA vehicles. We've got these roof skids, and these are actually available in different colors. If you get the red version, these will be red. And I believe there's a gunmetal as well. So you go and change that out if you want to. And then obviously inside here, we've got a roll cage, and it's not just for looks. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But inside there, we've got a full cockpit with a driver and passenger in there, and decals on the dashboard, in the center console area, and the helmets are separate, which is pretty neat. But back to that cage inside. Let me just pop this body off so I can show you guys. And in here, you can see the bottom of the cage goes to like this U channel. Well, this actually helps prevent the body from getting crushed in an upside down crash. So this actually keys in to this support plate on the top of the differential housing here. So it's pretty cool that they went and supported the center. That way the center section of the cab area of the truck doesn't get crushed or maybe break, and you're out a expensive body. So I like that. It's even got a little foam pad on there. But just overall, this is a great looking body. They've of course got the little rubber tethers on here for the body clip, so you never lose those. There's actually some Velcro on the inside as well, so it secures to the chassis so it's not fluttering while you're driving, and it is just awesome. I love the look of that 7-scale truck. And they actually have a gray version as well that you could buy, not as a kit, but as a separate body from what I was reading. And so if you don't like the red or you don't like the green, which I don't know why you wouldn't, there is a silver grayish option available too. All right, now we can get to the new truck, and like I said, there's a lot of new stuff on here. It's not just a total parts bin car, but there are a lot of shared parts on here, which is actually great because it's more likely you'll be able to get parts for it, maybe from your local hobby shop, because it is a shared part with other cars. All right, up front here, you'll notice we've got this big bash bumper up here, and it's actually got this rubber valance. So it gives it a bit more of a scale look in the front, I think. But if you do smash into something, you nose into something, that rubber valance is just going to flex versus braking. But this bumper here is some pretty serious plastic going on. It's actually got a big skid behind it that goes down to the bottom, and then this impact brace right here in the center. So if you're nosing this thing down, I think this is going to absorb a lot of the impact. And this has some weight to it. So you definitely want something that's going to absorb the impact versus just cracking. So obviously they did their homework there. The other thing that shows me that they were doing their homework on weight versus what could possibly break is this body mount up here. It's a 4-post body mount, actually front and rear, that goes up to this flex plate basically, and it's even foam padded. So when you go and crash, this flex plate is just going to move versus the body cracking versus the body posts cracking. So that's really cool to see that you really don't have to worry about it too much. I mean, obviously you don't want to crash often because things will start to wear out, but That's very, very cool. I like that. Okay, so those are obviously new parts. Let me show you the back of the vehicle while I'm talking about kind of exterior stuff. So this is a new rear bumper. We've got a lower skid here, and I mean, there is just tons of plastic and cross bracing here. This is a really solid rear bumper. So you're flipping this thing over, you get rear-ended during a race. Nothing's going to happen to that thing, in my opinion. I don't ever see anybody replacing that. And then on the side here, we've got these Nerf guards, and there's that Velcro that matches up with the body panels, or the sides of the body to keep it secure. And this is flexible here, and obviously these are some dirt guards it attaches to. I did notice there's 2 little extra slots here. I wonder if that's going to be something in the future that they're going to offer, maybe a different car. I don't know. I really like what's going on with all of the body features, bumpers and stuff. Really looks the part of a desert truck when it's all together. All right, now let's start talking about some of the suspension changes. I'm not going to go crazy into detail because we've seen a lot of stuff before. It's a pivot ball suspension up front, and they do have new arms on this. So I did go and check on the parts list. These arms are specific to this truck. I didn't see that they were shared anywhere else, and they are really thick. It looks really, really durable. I think, they just went and revised everything just to make sure that this thing holds up, and these arms are really solid. I mean, when I pulled this thing out of the box, that's what I noticed first when I checked out the chassis on this, was the arms really look solid now. The other new thing is obviously it has new shock towers on here for this new suspension geometry. They're really thick, 5mm thick shock towers. It's the same ARRMA shocks that we've seen before, large bore shock, but it does have new eyelets on the bottom and new shock perches on the bottom as well. Much more durable, much beefier than what I've seen in the past. So that should all hold up. I really like the suspension changes here. And obviously because of the new upper and lower arms, they had to go with a new dog bone, and it is CV style drive shafts up front. There are dog bones in the rear, and I'll get to the rear in a minute, but the really thick steel dog bone on this, ball bearing supported. And just from experience with other ARRMA vehicles, this setup works really well. One other thing I want to mention about the pivot ball suspension, the knuckle itself is really bulky, but the compression nut in there, the aluminum nut, does have a rubber O-ring on there now, just so that nut won't back out when you're driving from vibration or whatever. The steering knuckles also have an aluminum steering arm on there that connects to the steering tie rods. So, really bulky situation there as well. Oh, one last thing. I keep seeing new stuff on here that I do need to point out. The lower arm does have a cap on the end of it. It's aluminum cap, and what that does is in a crash, it prevents the arm from possibly cracking and the pivot ball, breaking through the arm. So, really well designed there. On the inside, the suspension pivots, it does have aluminum plates in there for the pins, to secure the pins, with plastic cover plates on them. And it's adjustable. Everything is adjustable. You could adjust camber, you could adjust caster on this easily, toe when we get to the steering, and overall really good. But this is a really long suspension travel truck, and that's kind of one thing I wanted to point out here is look at the suspension travel on this thing. I know when this truck came out, I saw a lot of people talking online that they wished that this was a solid axle rear truck, kind of like a desert truck really. But a independent suspension truck will handle really well. I think it's a bit easier to drive than a solid axle truck, and solid axle trucks are fun. But, I think to make up for it, they gave us this really long suspension travel here. So when we're watching this thing drive, we could watch the suspension drop out of it and get that feeling of excitement from a desert truck. So I'm really excited to see how it looks. Okay. Now let me move on to the steering of this. It's pretty much what we've seen on some of the other vehicles from ARRMA. We got the bell crank setup where the servo saver post is screwed together, so it shouldn't back out, but it still prevents damage to the servo. We've got the aluminum Ackerman bar in there, and again, the steering links are adjustable if you wanted to go and do that. And the steering servo, of course, goes back to an aluminum servo arm on the servo. All right, okay, so just to round out the front here, the upper plate is an aluminum plate. Again, better bracing up front. Everything just looks solid up front on this. And then we get to this big bar in the center here. This is a chassis stiffener bar. Just gives, bracing from the front to rear, but there's also bracing down to the chassis in the front and rear. And of course, you got your center bulkhead to help brace everything everything up. So there's really this nice system of bracing throughout, and we shouldn't have any chassis problems on this. This is a new chassis for this. It is an extra long chassis by the parts listing. So obviously it's a lot longer. It's got longer drive shafts in the center. But again, still well braced. So everything, hopefully we don't see any bending out of this truck. All right, let me move on to the, since I'm talking about the chassis, move on to the battery tray here, and it's what we've seen before on other ARRMA vehicles. Really adjustable battery tray with Velcro straps. It's got the slider plate up in the front to help secure the batteries in there, and really easy to access through the Velcro straps. I talked about the side dirt guards and everything, and we do have a receiver box over here to help protect the receiver from the elements. Let me start talking about electronics. Now, it is a ADS 15M servo in here, metal geared servo, and if I remember correctly, it's 200 inches of torque in that servo, so that should work well for a ready-to-run vehicle. Get these wheels turned. Right behind it is the BLX 185 speed controller, 10-gauge wire on this, which is pretty wild. We've seen that on other ARRMA vehicles before, but I just love the size of the wire. It handles lots of current. And then we have the IC5 plugs on here. These are the new plugs coming on the Horizon vehicles, and we even have a little jumper plug here if you're running a single pack, and if you're running 2 packs, you just pull that jumper out. The 185 speed controller, it is waterproof, 150 amp speed controller. Switches over here, little rubber boot on there. Again, just everything's waterproof on that. And that, of course, sends power to the 2050 kV brushless motor back here. We've seen in ARRMA vehicles again. Tried and true electronics in here. This stuff works great. I still run these electronics in a lot of my other ARRMA A-scale vehicles. Okay, now I guess I should talk a little bit about the drivetrain. The drivetrain has front, center, and rear gear differentials, oil-filled differentials. In the center, we've got a steel spur gear on there, all metal gears, of course, inside the differentials and the ring and pinion as well. Everything is ball bearing supported. And as I mentioned to you before, CV axles up front, dog bones in the center, and dog bones in the rear. I do want to point out that the dog bones in the rear have a very large end on the outside and a standard A-scale bone end on the inside of it that made up with the steel outdrives. They kind of look like a lightweight outdrive, but still on the strong side. So, ARRMA drivetrain is not really known for braking that often. There are some upgrade options out there for those of you that want to step up and go wild with it, but out of the box, they work out pretty well. And in the center here, there is a aluminum motor mount. I do want to point that out. Nice, easy to use aluminum motor mount. 2 screws on the top. You loosen those up and the motor slides in and out, so you could adjust the pinion gear. It comes set with the standard pinion on there, and then they do have a high-speed pinion that I'll show you in a little bit if you want to go and hit 60 miles an hour. Yes, this thing will go 60 with the optional pinion gear and 6S in there. And of course, if you've got a long enough runway to go and drive this thing, I bet you it's wild at 60 miles an hour. All right, let's move on to the rear of the truck, and much similar to the front. We've got those thick shock towers in the back. We've got those long travel aluminum shocks that we've seen on other ARRMA vehicles. And then again, the new rod ends and perches on the bottom. Adjustable links for the tie rods to adjust camber, and then new solid arms in the rear as well. Again, it's a new length for ARRMA. These aren't on any other vehicles. It's specific to the Mojave. And there are sway bars, actually. I forgot to mention that in the front. Sway bars front and rear. Aluminum hinge plates on the inside as well, and then really bulky hubs on the outside to support the wheels. 17 millimeter hex, and overall, this suspension on here looks really, really solid. I like the way everything looks on here. I like the way it feels, just really smooth, really well built from the factory. And now I think that just leaves the tires to talk about. These are the D-Boots Fortress tires. These have a really gnarly lug on them, look very cool. I bet you it's just going to work in all sorts of conditions, and probably even on road as well. I bet you have a wild squeal on the pavement. That'd be pretty neat. But it's got rims to match the body. It kind of looks like an A-scale style of gluing bead to it. So I haven't pulled the tire off this rim. There's no way I could get it off. It's glued really well. But it looks like it's glued like an A-scale style. But of course, it's the offset. It's got the smaller diameter here, larger diameter on the inside. And then, of course, there are some foams inside that are pretty firm, actually, and they are vented from the factory. The tires are vented. Okay, I think that wraps it up for all the new things that I needed to tell you about this. It's like other ARRMA vehicles. This is also really easy to work on. It's really easy to take out the center diff. Just 2 pins to remove this brace here, and once you take that out, it's 5 screws in total to get the center differential out. So if you need to do some maintenance there, the front and rear are a little bit more work because you got to get the bumpers out of the way, but the differential cases, really nice solid differential cases on this. And once you get to it, they are easy to get the differentials out for maintenance as well. All right, let me set this aside and just show you some of the other support gear that it comes with. Not too much to talk about. It does come with the STX2 radio system here from Spectrum. This is, you know, I think they should have included the DX2E with this. I'm not sure what the reasoning was, but for something that goes 60 miles, I probably would have liked to have seen that radio. This radio does work fine, but you know, for the size of the vehicle, the cost of the vehicle, I think that the DX2E would be a better option. But like I said, this will drive the car just fine. Now we've got the bag of support parts. I'll just go over this one really quick. We've got our usual tools and stuff in here. We've got a quick reference sheet that tells you all the things you need to know in order to go 60 miles an hour with the truck. There's pistons in here. I don't know why every company always gives you pistons with radio runs. Does anybody actually use these things? Do you change out your pistons in your radio runs? Let me know in the comments section below. I'd like to know what you guys do with that stuff. All right, and there is the larger pinion to go 60 miles an hour. We've got some Allen wrenches in here. Here is some extra decals in case you want to go and you know, put some more decals on there. It's pretty loaded up as is. And then there is the instruction manual in here, a bind plug, so if you need to rebind your radio system, that's in there as well. But this will help you get up and going if you are new to the hobby. I actually wouldn't recommend this as a first purchase, but you know, if you need getting up to speed, this will help you do it. And of course, you should go over it even if you're a seasoned hobbyist, because there's always tips in these that help you out. All right, you know what that means? It is time to go out and drive this. I'm going to go find some cool stuff to tear up. We're going to have a lot of fun. I don't know. I just don't know. If someone came up to me right now and said, Greg, what is your favorite ARRMA vehicle? I wouldn't know what to tell them because I have had a lot of great experiences with ARRMA vehicles lately. You know, I love the Notorious, the Creighton, the Infraction. They're all just so much fun. And then I drove this thing, and it is absolutely insane. From the first time I pulled the trigger, this truck did a wheelie, and it just totally blew my mind. I was not expecting a desert truck to pull a wheelie and carry it for I don't know how many feet, but it was just insane that this truck went and did that. It is loaded with power, and it is loaded with just tons of potential out there for performance on, you know, bashing courses, wherever you're going to drive this thing. But for testing, I went up to one of my usual test locations, just kind of this big open dirt field, lots of mounds of dirt to jump off of, big berms to go around and stuff like that. Kind of the perfect test bed for this desert style truck, and it was just a beast out there. It was an absolutely incredible drive, and I just couldn't get enough wheel time behind this rig. It is really that great. I know I'm gushing about it, but it was an absolutely awesome drive. This is a big machine, and it gets your heart pumping immediately. All right, onto the steering of this. This thing has plenty of steering out of the box. I don't think you really need to make any changes unless something were to happen to the steering servo. Maybe you'd upgrade then. But right out of the box, they did a great job. It's got plenty of steering, you know, especially with all the power behind it. You would expect it would be a lot of understeer when you're going hot into the corners. But with these, you know, large lug tires, the servo's got plenty of torque. It physically has enough throw. I really liked how this truck steered. Onto the acceleration. Guys, this thing is just an insane beast. Again, when I pulled the throttle for the first time, it pulled a wheelie. And every single time I would just grab too much throttle, it would wheelie. And to be honest with you, got a little bit of frustrating doing some wheelies. You know, you really had to get used to it. But once you did, it was awesome. The other thing to think about when you're just throttling this thing, when you're going over big jumps and stuff like that, if you pull the throttle last minute, it's going to want to just raise the nose up, and sometimes that can be a problem. The rear end will dig in, and maybe you'll flip over and stuff. But it has tons of power on tap. The coolest part of powering this was on some of the bumpy straights there at that dirt field. There was some bumps where this thing would just catch air and just lift off. You watch the suspension drop out. It was really, really cool to see. On the braking side of things, it's got tons of brake, and if you do get in trouble, it's got reverse to back out. So that's a lot of fun. Now, I do have to talk to you about the handling. The suspension travel on this is insane. You know, again, the suspension just drops out. It's like always on the ground, keeping this truck stable. And they just did a really good job with the long travel shocks on this, the long travel of the arms. The arms are certainly tough. I'll get to that in a minute. But you know, the handling was just great. Every time I jumped it, it was a nice, easy, controllable jump. The landings were super plush, and I mean, I was really launching this thing where I wasn't paying attention to the landing. I'm just like, let me see how far I can launch it. And you know, on landings where I thought this thing was just going to start tumbling and rolling, the suspension just soaked everything up. All the bumps and ruts just soaked that up. It was a great time driving this. Again, it kind of just went beyond my expectations for a desert truck. All right, I think that really just leaves durability to talk about now. And the front of this thing is pretty beat up. There was a lot of large rocks in that field where I go to test, and the front arms are missing chunks of plastic. The bumper is missing pieces of plastic. I was hitting some really large rocks with this. You know, the arms are not broken. There are no bent dog bones anywhere on here. Nothing wrong with the servo saver. The body is pretty beat up. I did rip the valance out. I had to go place that back in. But it's a tough machine. No sign of bends in the chassis or anything. The only issue I had, and it was kind of odd, was the tire fell off. The wheel nut backed off. Luckily, I found the wheel nut, went back, tightened it down. I mean, really cranked down on it, and it did go and fall off again, the same wheel nut. So maybe add a little bit of Loctite. They are serrated lock nuts. So they do dig into the rims, but maybe add a little bit of Loctite to it as well if you do find that problem with your ARRMA Mojave. And the only other thing that I do want to mention is I did notice the speed controller cut out on me about 2 or 3 times during one of my runs, and I was using some older battery packs during that run. They were in my Losi Super Baja review. I used them as far back as my Probo Zellos review, so these packs have had a lot of runs on them. And in talking to ARRMA, some battery packs, if there's a problem with the internal resistance of them, it may spike the speed controller and cause it to go into like a shutdown mode or a safety mode, from what I recall them saying. So make sure you have some really good packs. If you do notice them cutting out, it may be the pack itself, not the speed controller. I did go and test it with a temperature gun to make sure it wasn't overheating, and all the electronics were actually within normal limits on this, so I don't think it was any type of thermaling issue. I think it was just kind of a battery pack issue with it, but it's just something I want to mention to you guys in case somebody has a similar issue. But that's it, guys. This truck is a beast. I completely recommend getting this truck if you're looking for a big desert truck. It is truly impressive, and the 6S power is just incredible. You're guaranteed to have a lot of fun with it. ARRMA did a great job with this. There's plenty of new stuff on here to be excited about. The truck itself looks awesome. It is just a truly well-designed truck. Even though it doesn't have a solid rear axle like a real truck does, it totally makes up for that by just giving you excellent performance, great handling, and something that you're going to have a lot of fun driving.